Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Chats with Kat on the Voice of Adoptees podcast. I am your host, Kat, and I hope everyone is having a great week so far. Don't forget to grab your coffee, tea, or preferred beverage and settle on in. I'm currently here with Lauren, who is an author, Tik Tok adoptee conversationalist and advocate, and a legal assistant. Welcome to the show, Lauren. Great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be on here.
Of course. So briefly introduce yourself to those who are listening.
Hi, my name is Lauren Trostclear, and I am an adoptee from Florida. I was adopted at 2 days old into a closed adoption in the late 80s when it was still not very popular for open adoptions. That came about a couple of years after my adoption was finalized. So I didn't really know much about who my parents were growing up. I knew my birth mom's first name, which was very uncommon. I knew that I had an older sister that was about 5 at the time of my birth and the hospital I was born in, and that was about it. I always knew that I was adopted. My parents told me when I was probably about 3 or 4. It had come up in conversation, and my mom told me, that she had not carried me in her belly, that another mother had, and that even though my other mother loved me very much, she couldn't take care of me, though they didn't know the circumstances as to why. But they let me know that if I wanted to find her one day or try to find her, that they would fully support me. So when I was 18, I had just moved to Gainesville for college. And it was before Ancestry DNA, before 23andMe. Facebook had just started probably about 7 months before, and it was still just for college students. So I didn't really know how to go about doing that. I was always told that I could just kind of go to the courthouse when I was 18 and find out. But I have since learned in recent years that that's not the case. You have to have a court order to get those birth records or your birth parents' permission. So I was bored on the internet one night and I wondered if maybe I could find her somehow through the internet. And I did a Google search and an adoption website popped up called Adoption Registry. I'm not even sure it's around anymore, but I put in the little bit of information that I knew about my adoption and my birth mother. And I hit submit on the post and didn't think anything of it again because I figured the chances of her finding that one post out of all the people on the internet was slim to none. But about 3 months after I posted that, I got a phone call one night. It was a couple of weeks before Christmas in 2004. And a lady on the other end of the phone said that she had come across my adoption post and that she thought that she was my birth mother. And I was completely skeptical that it happened that easily. So any questions or whatever, anything about my birth mother that my adopted mother had told me, I started firing off questions at her to see if she would answer it correctly or not. And she said that it had been so long that she had forgotten about some of those things. But we made plans to meet up. And she was living in Jacksonville at the time where I was from. And I found out that I had a younger brother that was about 1.5 years younger than me. And he was attending the high school that I had just graduated from the year before. And then my mom's house backed up to one of my really good longtime friends. So I had passed her 1,000,000 times and never knew it. It was crazy, all of the little ways that we were connected over the years and never knew that we were right up under each other's noses. And then through my birth mom, I ended up finding my birth father, who ended up being married. He was married at the time and had 2 kids. And when I found him, he was still married. So he didn't want anything to do with me, didn't want to have a relationship or anything, and wanted me to keep everything a secret because he didn't want his family to find out. So I kept it a secret for 18 years. But in 2022, I decided to reach out to my siblings on that side. And I wrote them a letter and I let them know who I was and everything and told them that I would like to have a relationship with them if they were open to it, but I understood if they were not. And about 2 weeks later, I got a response back from my brother and my sister. And I have not met my sister yet. Our communication kind of stopped, but I have been able to establish a relationship with my brother over the last couple of years. So that's been cool. Still don't talk to my father, but.
Okay, so I think your story is really beautiful.
Thank you.
It's interesting while you're speaking about we were right under each other's noses, the 6 degrees of separation, right? I was going to ask where you
Yes.
were adopted from, and you've made it very clear that basically you grew up in the same area that your biological parents were as well. I think it's really
Yes.
cute that you would pass by like your best friend's house and you would pass by her house at the same time without even realizing it, right?
Hmm.
So I want to talk about the
Yes.
closed adoption for a moment. How did that affect you, knowing that it was a closed adoption? What were some of the things that you struggled with, knowing that you couldn't necessarily access your family's records so easily?
I think identity was kind of something that I struggled with growing up because I didn't look like my adopted parents. I didn't act like them. My personality was very different. When I did finally meet my birth mom, it all made sense. Even though I was not raised with her, I'm the only child that looks just like her, and I'm the child that acts the most like her, too. She was actually also a legal assistant for over 25 years, and that's what I do now. It
Oh,
just
wow.
was kind of a fluke that I ended up in that field, but I've
Mm-hmm.
been doing that for 6 years now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So your adoptive parents were very supportive. They would tell
Yes.
you you are adopted, that sort of thing. And was there any ever hesitation from your adoptive parents on you trying to find your biological family or anything like that?
No, my parents didn't know that I was looking for her at the time because I honestly didn't really think that I would actually find her as easily as I did. So I always kind of felt like it was meant to be for us to end up back in each other's lives when we did. She was at her absolute best. She had struggled with addiction on and off for many years. And she ultimately lost her battle to addiction in 2020. But when I found her in 2004, she was clean and sober. She had been for almost a year. She went back to college. She graduated with her bachelor's degree with honors from FSU. And she was just doing really well in life. But somewhere along the way, those last like 5, 6 years, she fell back into those old habits, and it just kind of, the disease progresses. But my parents were always supportive of that. They weren't hesitant. The night that I found her, I was waiting for my roommate to get home from college because I wanted to tell somebody about what had happened. And I'd known my roommate since I was 2 years old. So she had always known, that
Oh,
I wanted to
wow.
find my birth mom and how much that meant to me. She was there from the start to the finish. And so I told her, and then we went out to have dinner afterwards at Ale House, and she was like, it was probably 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And she was like, well, you've got to tell your parents like tonight and call them, even though it's late. So I did. I called them, and they were so excited for me. The only thing my mom was worried about is she didn't want me to tell them how old she was. She's actually the same age as my biological grandmother was, my birth mom's mom. It's funny because talking about those 6 degrees of separation, my grandmother, my birth mom's mother, actually attended elementary school and grew up in the same area as my adopted father and adoptive aunt, his sister. And they also attended high
Wow.
school with my birth father. Different times, but my adoptive aunt was friends with my uncle on my birth father's side and never put two and two together until just recently because she kept saying his name. And I was like, I don't know anybody by that name. But it turned out that was his nickname, and it was the same person. So it's definitely a small, small world.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. Oh, I love hearing stuff like that. That makes me so like happy. So
Yes.
how did that go when are the two families friends now? Like is your family friendly with them? Because there's a
With
lot of
my,
history there. There's a lot of memories.
yes. They are friendly with my birth mom's family. They have not met my brother on my birth father's side because him and a cousin are about the only people I really speak to in that family because the rest of them haven't really come around to the fact of who I am and how I came about. Hopefully one day they will, but if they don't, that's fine too. I do understand that's kind of a big shock to swallow. But
Right.
my birth
I
mom and siblings used to come over to my adoptive parents' house. My parents were at my sister's wedding when she got married. My mom would spend holidays with us sometimes. So, and they would talk when I wasn't around.
Oh, it must be so comforting to know that you're all together and you're blending together. I think this is more of a rare
Yes.
sort of situation within the adoptee
I'm
community. This is amazing.
finding that out recently. I kind of, I guess, thought that that was the
Right.
norm just because that's the way that I grew up and everything. My dad told my mom, my birth mom, when we found her, whatever, and they met her for the first time, that there was enough love to go around for everyone, which is true, you know?
Right. That's amazing.
So
That's really beautiful.
thank you.
You didn't have a relationship with your biological father. How did it feel for you growing up? How did it feel for you growing up
Yes.
to not have that connection to him? And once you found him, how did it feel to know that he almost sort of rejected you and your existence, even though you were his child? How did that feel?
It felt pretty crummy. I don't really think that I was prepared for that. I was so young when I found them, and there wasn't the kind of adoption education that we have these days with TikTok and the internet and everything else and adoption groups. So I kind of just went into it blindly thinking that it was going to be like a Hallmark movie, you know, and there was going to be a happy ending and everybody would be excited to see me again because my mom, you know, welcomed me with open arms and was ecstatic to see me again. So I kind of just assumed that it would be the same with my birth father. And it was kind of a long road trying to find him because when I went to my birth mom, because it was right before Christmas when I found her, and the person that we thought was my birth father, my adoptive mom knew he had never had any other kids. He had struggled with alcoholism, but he was doing better now. He had been in rehabs around the world. And she thought it would be a great thing, great Christmas present for me to reach out and find him, you know, and for us to have a relationship. So when I went to my birth mom, she was like, well, I actually don't know if that is your dad. There's two other people that it could be. So that was kind of a shock to me. I grew up kind of sheltered too, so I wasn't used to that. But I got the information from her about who she thought my birth father was. And I was able to track him down because we were still running on phone books and pay phones and stuff back then. So I called the operator and I asked for everybody with that first and last name listing. And I just started going through all of the listings and calling people and telling them my story. And about halfway down, I got a lady on the phone. He had never told his parents about me because they had heart problems. They were older and they were very religious. And because they were not keeping me, they felt it was best to just not say anything to them. Because I think that they thought the chances of ever seeing me again were slim to none. So it ended up being his mom that answered the phone, and I told her my story, and she I could hear the shock in her voice. She was like, hold on. And I could hear her like in the background talking to him or whatever. And then he came on the line and he was super excited to talk to me and everything. And we made plans to meet up, him, my birth mom, and me, and I brought my best friend with me. And then we did a DNA test to make sure, you know, that before we got too far into it, that he was my dad. And it came back that he was not. So the other two people were the married attorney and the guy that she was dating at the time. And the guy that she was dating at the time had just gotten divorced and had a stroke and was in a wheelchair. So he said, absolutely not. I got too much going on. I'm not taking a DNA test. So my birth father also said no, but I thought, you know, because I was 18 and young and impulsive at the time, that if I went and talked to him, maybe he would say yes and he would have a different reaction. So on Valentine's Day, I went to his office and I showed up unannounced and asked to talk to him. And he came right out and he knew who I was right away because I looked so much like my birth mom. And so he whisked me back into a conference room and asked me, you know, what it was I wanted. And I told him, and he agreed to do it as John Doe, but made it clear that he did not want anything to do with me beyond that. And I thought that I would be okay with that, you know, just at least knowing who it was. But I wasn't really. I wanted to have a relationship with him. So it was kind of like a double whammy when he made it very clear that he did not want anything to do with me. We had lunch one time that my birth mom arranged. but it was kind of awkward and he didn't want to answer any questions about family or anything. So he never reached out to me again after that. And I never reached out to him. And then in 2017, I ran into him at a 5K and we were like pretty close to each other. We locked eyes and I could tell when he realized who I was, he took off running in the other direction because his daughter was outside and he didn't want his family to know. So I think all of that kind of made me finally decide, like, hey, you know, just because he doesn't want something to do with me doesn't mean that the other people in my family wouldn't want to have a relationship. So that's kind of why I decided to reach out. And my mom had passed away too at that point.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
For sibling dynamics, so when you did reach out to the siblings, how did that go? What was that like for you? For me in particular, I felt a very strong bond with my biological brother, not necessarily with my biological mom, but my brother, when I saw his face, it just clicked. Everything just clicked. That sensation that you talk about where you just knew, I had that.
Yes.
And my biological brother and I are very close to this day. Is it that way with you?
I feel like my birth mom was the person I was always the very closest to, I think because we are so much alike. But I'm also very close with my sister on my mom's side. And I do still talk to my brother as well. He lives in Jacksonville. My sister lives out on the West Coast. But I feel like I probably am the closest to my sister and then now my brother on my father's side.
Okay. So what are the sibling dynamics like? Tell me a little bit about your siblings. How similar are you to them? Because you say you get along better with your sister. How similar to you is she?
Very, very similar. It's so weird because I grew up with a sibling in my adopted family. We were adopted from different families, but we were very different. And we were like 8 years apart growing up. So there was a big age gap too there. So it was cool when I met my siblings and my birth mom because I'm kind of like, oh, wow, this all makes sense now. You know, this is why I'm like this or that, you know. And I've seen that too with my birth brother when I met him. And it was 2023 we met. In the beginning of 2023, we talked for a while prior to that. And then we finally met in person for coffee. I think it was New Year's Day of 2023. But it's funny because I used to think, oh, you know, I didn't get anything from that side of the family. I'm just like my birth mom and everything. But I can see now that I did get a lot of things from that side of the family. Like my brother is very non-confrontational, and I've always been like that also. He was in drama in high school. We both went to college in Gainesville. So I can see all the little similarities, and that's kind of cool to see. I love my adoptive parents, but we were very different growing up. So kind of cool to see where I got all of those things from. And then the legal field too.
I love that.
Yes.
Based off of your experience, which is, I feel, unique. It's more of a unique adoptee experience where you find your family, you're within 6 degrees of separation, you have a good amount of the family accepting you. Is that what inspired you to write your novels?
Yeah, I think kind of losing my mom too. I started kind of thinking about my adoption more and everything because it kind of felt like because she was the person I was closest to, it kind of felt like I lost that biological connection to my family. So, and then I also discovered adoptee TikTok. So I started watching videos and connecting with other adoptees and stuff. And I was like, you know what? I've always loved writing. My mom loved to write too. We always talked about writing a book about our story together, but we never got the chance to. So that is something I still would like to do. I've started writing a little bit of it, but I haven't finished with just the first couple of pages. But I find it a little easier to put the short stories to paper. And it's also very therapeutic for me too, being able to share my experience and everything and connect with other people that have similar experiences.
Was writing something that you always gravitated towards to release your feelings, especially about your adoption?
Yes. Yeah, I always had a diary growing up until my mother found it. Then I stopped keeping one. But I still love to write. Like when something's going on in my life, like, or if I'm having some kind of confrontation with somebody or something, I find it easier to just get it out on paper so I can really say what it is that I'm thinking and everything.
So how did you find adoptee TikTok?
I don't even really know, to be honest with you. I think maybe I searched for adoption or adoptee or somebody popped up in my feed, but it was actually kind of another TikToker that kind of made me feel more encouraged to reach out to my brother and sister because she had a sort of similar situation. She was adopted and her dad didn't want anything to do with her, but she decided to reach out to the rest of the family. I don't think she had any siblings, but she said that her uncle and her aunts and stuff all welcomed her with open arms and they were, upset with her dad for the way that he treated her and everything. And I thought, well, maybe somebody in the family would want something to do with me. Like, I don't know unless I don't try. So, and I think that they were a little upset too because I had known for 18 years and never said anything to them before that. But my mom's also kind of like told me, oh, you need to keep this a secret, because of the family dynamic and everything. You don't want to upset the family and yada, yada, yada. So I just, I was very non-confrontational then. So I wanted to keep the peace and everything. And, my mom had always said that sibling relationships with your birth father's family, when you don't really spend a lot of time together and stuff can be kind of different sometimes than your sibling relationships with your mom.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been, but I think it's really just because of the whole aspect of how the whole thing started and the fact that I was the product of the affair,
Right. Of course. When you found adoptee TikTok, how did that make you feel? I recently discovered it and there's a lot of different opinions. There's a lot of different directions. I like to listen to the lives. So
Yes.
How did that make you feel when you first found adoptee TikTok?
Kind of like finding a part of myself. Like it was cool to find other people in similar situations that could relate. And it kind of, I guess, helped me come out of the fog a little bit and be more open to all the different aspects and stuff. When you grow up one certain way, you kind of don't realize, like, I didn't know anybody really adopted growing up. I was kind of the only one in my group that was adopted. So there wasn't really anybody to talk to about that. And I don't know, as a kid, I didn't really want to talk about being adopted. I'm a lot more open about it now as an adult than I was when I was a kid, because I think I was still kind of trying to process everything and figure out why my parents gave me away in the first place,
Right. Do you feel that listening to other people's lives helped you find your voice in a way?
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
So when did you start going live and having conversations about adoption? Tell me a little bit about that.
I'm primarily make videos. I do go live sometimes, but it's mostly been videos and stuff. And I have had other adoptees reach out to me from TikToks, from some of the stories that I've written. I had one girl that reached out to me from the story I wrote about my birth father, and she was in a similar situation. And she said, that her birth father lived in the same town as her. They'd pass each other all the time, and he would kind of do the same thing my birth father did at that 5K, like just not acknowledge her, keep on walking, and how hurtful that was to her. And it was cool to be able to connect with somebody else in a similar situation, know you're not alone.
So what kind of content is on your TikTok?
I talk about adoption. I talk about my experience. I talk about finding my birth family, finding my birth father, and how that went. Sometimes I touch on how the privatized adoption industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry that's not really for the best interest of the child. It's more for padding their pockets. Mine was a privatized adoption, and I have a fellow legal assistant that worked in privatized adoptions for a while, and I just kind of think it's corrupt how the whole thing goes on and how it's illegal for them to do what they do, paying $50,000 for a human being. I feel like adoption was started to help children find a family, not to produce children so that somebody can have a family, you know?
Right. So I'm just going to cut you off because that belief that not just you, but many adoptees feel is controversial within adoptee TikTok. The different comments that you may get on your TikTok based off of your videos and your beliefs of this, which again is very echoed within the community. Do you receive the opinions of biological parents or adoptive parents, those looking to adopt? What is that like?
I get mixed comments. I do get some people that get kind of angry when I say that, you know, because they're like, well, what about the children in foster care? And what about the children with no homes? And I understand that. And I agree that children that don't have a home, you know, absolutely should be adopted. But I know, for instance, my friend that worked in adoption, they had one birth mom that would just keep popping out babies. She was on her 10th baby that she'd given up for adoption because she knew that they would fund her life and stuff in the meantime. But I get a lot of mixed reviews. I do believe in adopting from foster care. Those children's parents have their rights have been terminated, so they don't have a home to go to if they don't get adopted. And that's something I've actually looked into before. I went through the foster care training and stuff to be a foster parent a couple of years ago, but then life happened. So I never finished like the home study things. But I'm actually looking into adopting 2 children from foster care right now. That's parents have had their rights terminated. A family friend of ours has had them for the last year, and she knew that I was looking into doing fostering. So I'm nothing set in stone yet or anything. I'm still waiting to hear back from a caseworker. But situations like that, like I do agree, you know, the children need a home. In my situation, I know that I was better off in the home I grew up in. I missed my mom a lot growing up, and it was very confusing, but I know that she struggled with addiction. My dad would not have ever been in the picture, and that was a big thing for her. She wanted me to have a mom and a dad and somebody that could provide for me better than she could, because she, at the time, was recently divorced from my sister's dad. She was struggling to raise my sister. She was living with my grandparents. She had no health insurance, no job. And she said that it wasn't fair for her to try to feed a child in a hand-to-mouth manner and for that child to never have another parent around to help. So I know that my situation or whatever, I was better off where I grew up. But I know that not all adoptees come from that same situation. Some parents, you know, just simply don't have the resources to be able to take care of their children.
What is one comment from someone in the adoptee community? You don't necessarily obviously need to say who, but what is one comment on one of your videos that really stood out to you that you still remember to this day?
I think it's kind of the narrative that because people are adopted that they need to be grateful. I also get a lot of friction sometimes from people, even from people I know personally, that it's offensive to my birth or to my adoptive parents for me to even talk about my birth parents or to have gone looking for them. But my adoptive parents have never felt any ill will towards me finding my birth family. They were always very encouraging of it and everything. And they know at the end of the day that they're still my parents. You know, we talk every day and they'll always be my parents.
Right.
I just, for a while, had 3 parents.
Right. Something I think is interesting among the adoptee community on TikTok is there's a lot of lives. I assume that you also watch these lives.
Yes.
What is one of the more memorable conversations that you have seen happening on adoptee TikTok? What is something that you remember and have participated in?
I think like them talking about coming out of the adoption fog. I don't think I ever really realized any of that stuff until I kind of started reading and researching and stuff. because you're fed one narrative your whole life, to be grateful and everything that you're adopted and that adoption is love and all that. And adoption can be an amazing thing, but it comes with a lot of loss too and a lot of complex emotions. And I think that that's something that you are working through for your whole life for a lot of people. I know
Oh,
that there are some
absolutely.
adoptees that don't care to find their birth families.
So, because you were a legal assistant, and I believe you mentioned having experience or having known people who are also legal assistants within the adoption industry, right?
Hmm.
What is something maybe that they have felt was very difficult that maybe you guys have talked about because you are adopted, they are within that industry dealing with adoption. So what is one thing that maybe you have talked about that is kind of tough to hear a little bit?
Really, she's just kind of, we've talked about like some of the slightly shady practices that can go on within that industry because it's not really regulated. That was kind of part
Mhm.
of why she got out of working in the place that she was working because she didn't agree with a lot of stuff that they were doing. I've worked with adoptions too before, as I worked in family law for 5 years, but our adoptions were never private adoptions. They were adoptions within the family or by, a friend of the family or something, or by a step parent. So it was a little bit different. I think the last one I worked on was an adoption by a step parent because the other parent had passed away. So the parent that was still surviving had remarried and everything, and they'd been together for a while, and she was going to adopt the child. I actually, in my biological family, I have my mom's sister, her two oldest boys. Their mom passed away when they were, I think, like 3 and 4 or something, and she legally adopted them after their mom had passed, and she and their dad had married.
You mentioned that adoption is a billion-dollar industry. I'm inclined to agree. I would like to know your opinion about the adoption industry as a whole, knowing that it is privatized. Many adoptees say that it is similar to human trafficking or it can be related or looked at as such. I would really, knowing that you work in the legal field, knowing that you are also an adoptee, I really would like to hear what you believe and what you agree with, what you don't agree with, sort of thing.
I do agree a little bit that it's almost kind of like human trafficking. I don't think that people should have to pay that much money to take over a child. I understand attorney's fees and stuff like that, but attorney's fees don't add up to $50,000. So, it's the attorney's pockets that are getting padded in the process. And that's why they push stuff. I think, like I've said before, that there are children that need a home, but I feel like there's a better way to go about doing that, like foster care. They give the parents a chance to be parents for a year. And if they cannot complete, whatever it is that they were doing wrong in the first place, that they can't change those things, then their rights get terminated and that child goes to somebody that can raise them and give them a stable home. But I think that parents should have a chance to be able to raise their children. I also think that adopting within the family is probably a better option than being adopted out to somebody that is essentially a stranger in the beginning. Like that was a big concern for my mom. Like she said that she felt a lot of peace that she was doing the right thing, but she also worried too over the years, are they taking care of me? Are they doing what they said they were going to do? Like, is she safe? And you don't know the answers to that. You don't know whether you'll ever even see that child again. But I know that I've read only about 5% of adoptions these days are closed. Most of them are more open. And that is one thing that my mom said if she could go back and redo that, she would change. She would still give me up for adoption, she said, but she would have made sure that she got pictures and some contact over the years.
Okay, so that's a lot to dissect. I did not know that a lot of adoptions are now open. Are we talking about in the United States, I assume, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure about outside. I know probably outside in some of the situations, it's probably hard to find a birth parent again if the child has been abandoned or whatever.
Right. Okay. So with that, I feel what you are advocating for is potentially, obviously, open adoption, but you work in the realm of kinship adoption as well. What is your opinion on kinship adoption? Do you think that it is good for children to be adopted within their kin or perhaps within the area? Because that's what happened to you. And it seemed that it was fortunately very easy for you to find your family. And again, there must be a sense of healing that comes with that, right? Knowing
absolutely.
So I just want to hear your opinion on kinship adoption and how you feel about that.
So I think kinship adoption can be a great thing because the child still gets to be with people that are like them, personality wise, that look like them, that can tell them, the answers to their questions about why their family gave them up for adoption. They're still able to, if it's safe, of course, be around that birth parent and see them and have a relationship with them. I think that, I don't know, but I think it would probably be a little bit easier to adjust to than one day finding out, hey, you were given it to us by your other mother that didn't know us, we don't know why, but here we are. It was very confusing growing up because I always wondered, well, if my parents loved me, then why did they give me away? As a child, you can't really process that or understand. But I did understand in that moment that, my parents were essentially strangers when she handed me over to them. So that was kind of a hard thing to grasp growing up. I don't really think that I was able to kind of come to terms with it until I found my mom and got all the answers to those questions of why she gave me up and everything.
So in terms of healing, how have you healed over the years? What has helped you heal? I'm sure that obviously finding your biological family was huge, but in what other ways have you grown as a person from who you were way back when? I want to know what your journey looked like.
Like you said, finding my birth mom was a big first step in that. And I think it was healing for her too, also, because we both kind of could look at each other like a mirror and be like, appreciate the parts of us, that maybe we didn't before. And it helped me kind of have a better understanding of who I am and stuff and why I act the way I do or do the things that I do. I think that reaching out to my brother and sister on my father's side also has helped me heal a lot because it was a secret I was carrying around that was weighing me down for 18 years. And I felt a lot lighter once I kind of got that off my chest because I'm not wondering anymore, oh, what could be, would they want to have a relationship if I did or didn't reach out? Mm-hmm. So I think that's been a huge thing too. Sharing my story has also been very healing, connecting with other people that have gone through similar walks of life, being able to talk about all those little common things, understand better kind of how I was feeling and stuff growing up and why.
So what is one thing you would tell your younger self now as an adult?
Everything's going to be okay. And that, you will find your mom one day and everything will work out the way it's supposed to.
I love that. So Lauren, I just want you to say what is your TikTok handle so that those listening to this episode can follow you if they would like to continue a conversation as well.
It's Lauren, M as in Marie, Trosclair. So the last name is Trosclair.
Wonderful. So you can find Lauren on TikTok at that handle. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Chats with Kat. A very special thank you to our guest, Lauren. Stay tuned for another episode of Chats with Kat on the Voice of Adoptee podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and share this episode so that Lauren's voice and story can be heard. And always remember, someone somewhere is thinking of you. You are not alone.